So today we will talk about Ayn Rand and try to understand her philosophy, which is Objectivism. Ayn Rand was a famous 20th century author and philosopher. She was born in Russia into a Jewish family. Then, at the age of 21, she moved to America, where she spent the rest of her life. She has two most famous novels, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, which are based on her philosophy, Objectivism. She has always been a controversial figure in philosophical circles. And in my opinion, she is the most misunderstood philosopher of her time. Most people neither understood her work, nor did she receive the recognition she deserved. And why do I say this? We will try to understand that further as we go along. So let's begin and understand her philosophy, which is Objectivism. Objectivism is based on certain principles. And first, we will go through these principles one by one, theoretically. Then we will further break them down and understand in practical terms what Ayn Rand's philosophy is. The first principle is objective reality. According to Rand, reality exists independent of consciousness. This means that reality is not dependent on our perception. It is not based on our thoughts or our point of view. The world is what it is. And this concept opposes all forms of idealism. Idealism refers to the philosophy that believes reality is mentally constructed or dependent on perception. The second important principle is reason. According to Rand, reason is the only way to acquire knowledge. But reason, as she defines it, must be based on logic and empirical evidence. In her view, reason is both a necessary and sufficient condition for understanding and knowing the world. The only condition is that reason must be logically consistent and not based on one's personal perception. The third principle is self-interest or rational egoism. According to Rand, the highest moral purpose of a person is their own happiness. It is everyone's duty to prioritize their self-interest and achieve their full potential. But this does not mean exploiting others. Rand says that one should pursue their self-interest rationally and through objective means. And if everyone does this, peace and harmony can exist in society. According to Rand, altruism is an evil concept. For those who don't understand, altruism means selfless concern or duty for the welfare of others. Rand argues that by neglecting one's own happiness and following outdated ethical and moral systems, a person will create problems both for themselves and for society. Because such a person can never be truly happy, nor can they do any productive or creative work. According to Ayn Rand, honesty, integrity, and productivity are traits that should be valued, not self-sacrifice or community welfare. The fourth principle is capitalism. According to Rand, a free market with minimal government intervention is the only ideal political system. Because only in such a system are individual rights and personal freedom is possible. Ayn Rand strongly opposes collective ideologies because, in her view, individual rights always come before collectivist rights. So these are the pillars on which her philosophy stands: objective reality, reason, self-interest, and capitalism. Now, let's try to understand Rand's ideology in more depth and detail. Rand places the greatest emphasis on the idea that individual rights and a person's selfish pursuit of happiness are above everything else. She does not believe in any form of moral or ethical duty. In fact, according to her, it is an evil system. A system which talks about self-sacrifice or placing others' interests above one's own is, according to her, an immoral or evil system. And this is what makes her the most controversial. Because this ideology opposes many philosophical giants before her, like Kant and Karl Marx. But this information you can find on Wikipedia. We haven't come here to discuss textbook stuff. Here, I will take some creative liberty and try to explain whether Kantian ethics really differ from Rand's ideology. Now, the big picture is that most people don't even understand Kantian ethics, because understanding it is quite a difficult task. And I think even Rand never fully understood Kant's ethical and moral framework, and she was quite critical of it. But in my opinion, there isn't much difference between the two philosophies. It's just a matter of the words used. The essence of both is the same, only the way of expressing it is different. Let me explain how. When Kant talks about a universal moral system, which applies to every individual, regardless of their own interests or opinions, most people think of it as a moral or ethical duty being imposed on them, requiring them to put their own interests aside. Rand also misunderstood him and said that a system based on abstract duties and imperatives is irrational, and it stops a person from reaching their full potential. But in my opinion, it's not that simple, because Kant's categorical imperative doesn't talk about any abstract duty or sacrifice. It's about developing a universal moral system that can be applied to every person and in every circumstance. When Kant says, rather than following personal happiness or desires, one should follow a system based on which a universal law can be created, and one that you yourself would not want anyone to break. For example, no one would want someone to take their life, and you wouldn't want anyone to kill someone else for their personal interest or pleasure. And if someone does that, it would be an immoral act, because you wouldn't want that for yourself, but you have done it to another person. But if we follow Rand's philosophy and prioritize individual rights, then if someone says, I get happiness from killing someone, or my selfish interest is fulfilled by it, then according to Rand, this should be considered morally justified. Got stuck, didn't you? Even the big philosophical giants get caught in this, because defining the concept of morality is the greatest problem humanity faces. This is the grand problem of morality, how to say what is right and what is wrong. It's not a child's game. All of the world's philosophy, all the wisdom literature has been dedicated to solving this very question. And that's why I said understanding Kantian ethics is not child's play. The problem that Kant took on is the biggest problem that humanity faces, because defining personal happiness and selfish interests with complete objectivity is very difficult. Humans are basically driven by their emotions and desires, and these define their happiness or sadness. But just accepting something as right simply because someone wants it or likes it or gets pleasure from it is not a logical or moral argument. Anyone can want anything. Anyone can have any desire, but that doesn't make it right or morally acceptable. There must be some empirical evidence, reason, logic, or objective parameters to create a universal moral code. And since humans gained a certain level of cognitive ability and consciousness, these questions have been raised. What does this world mean? Why is it like this? Where did it come from? What is our role in it? What is right and what is wrong? And every civilization, every culture, has provided its own solution to this problem. From ancient religions and philosophies such as Egyptian religion, Vedic religion, ancient Greek philosophy, Buddhism, Taoism, Jainism, and Confucianism. And this chain continues to this day, and perhaps will continue in the future as well. But we were talking about Ayn Rand, so my understanding is that the happiness she talks about is not some abstract selfish pleasure-seeking idea. And when Kant talks about a universally applicable moral framework, he is not talking about self-sacrifice or following an abstract duty. Both, in their own way, are trying to establish a moral framework in which subjectivity does not exist. Both are talking about reason, logic, evidence, and logical consistency. When Rand says that the first duty of a person is to achieve their full potential and focus on their happiness, she is not talking about superficial pleasure-seeking activities. As she says, an ideal man is a man of reason. A person should use logic, rationality, and critical thinking to achieve their happiness, not running after blind desires. A person who focuses on their happiness will respect the rights of others, not violate them. And when Kant says that running after one's desires and interests is immoral, he means desires that arise from a mind that is unconscious, a mind that considers only sensory experience as the truth. For such a mind, pleasure and instant gratification are the highest virtues. Kant calls such a person and their actions immoral. Throughout history, the greatest thinkers and the most profound philosophies have had one common goal: to give some objective and logical meaning to our life's experiences. Between the absurdity of life and death, the goal of every great philosophy has been to create an authentic and fundamental moral framework. A moral framework that is not subjective, but one that can be derived from empirical evidence, critical thinking, and logic. It should not be based on anyone's emotions or desires, nor on any old tradition or culture. And it should not be based on irrational religious or abstract moralities. And this can also be seen in Rand's philosophy, where she places the greatest emphasis on the idea that reaching one's highest potential and achieving authentic happiness should be the ultimate goal of a person's life. This is moral, this is virtuous. There is no need to follow any duty or norm that is irrational or devoid of logic. But because the mind and the thoughts within it cannot be examined in the same way as a material or physical process, whenever issues related to the mind and consciousness arise, such as what is right or wrong, moral or immoral, virtuous or evil, there is a significant scope for subjectivity, and language often becomes a barrier in understanding any philosophical thought. This is why when people criticize Rand's philosophical ideas, claiming that the rejection of moral duty toward others is a wrong concept, and such an individualistic thought process will lead to a lack of mutual cooperation and mutual respect in society. They argue that this will create a society where people will have neither empathy for each other nor any moral sense of responsibility toward society. But as I mentioned earlier, creating a moral and ethical framework based on rationality and logical consistency is not a child's play. And truly understanding any profound philosophy is also not a child's game. Those who argue that such an individualistic approach could lead to chaos in society and ultimately disorder are not only biased but also lack the capacity to truly understand Rand's ideas. A moral and ethical framework, such as the one we commonly see in almost every culture, do you think that it creates harmony or order in society? Does such a society become crime-free? Are people in such societies truly responsible or honest? Today, living in the 21st century, look around you. How much love and harmony do we truly have? A society that is governed by borrowed and inconsistent moralities doesn't produce harmony, but rather conflict and chaos. And Rand also says that a person who cannot respect themselves cannot possibly respect others. Such a person cannot be honest, compassionate, or creative. This is why Rand places the highest emphasis on the individual and their right to life, freedom, and happiness. And by happiness, she does not mean any irrational or delusional form of happiness. What she means is that a person should use their reason, rationality, and critical thinking to achieve their highest potential. And such a person, who respects their own rights, will also respect the rights of others. Only then can true compassion and empathy be developed within society, where people help and cooperate with each other, but not out of self-sacrifice or to fulfill some moral duty, but out of their own will, out of love and out of respect. So, that's all for today. Stay connected on this journey of learning and understanding. Thanks, and share if you found this valuable.